Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel continues to ease restrictions, but all while the rate of virus testing also drops. The government offers a massive lifeline to Israeli airline El Al, and an incredible rare artifact is uncovered in Jerusalem just in time for the Lag Baomer holiday. The coronavirus is down but not out in Israel as the death toll climbs to over 250 Sunday night, with 5 deaths recorded. And dozens of new coronavirus cases have also been diagnosed as well, bringing the total in the country to over 16,492, 73 of whom are in serious condition, including 64 on ventilators. But do the continuously dropping numbers mean that the threat is nearly gone? Not necessarily. With a capacity to test up to 15,000 people per day, Israel has only been testing nearly 8,000 daily until now. But by Saturday, that number has fallen to 3,600 and again to 3,000 Sunday. The health ministry says that fewer suspected cases are coming to have swabs taken, though, which more than likely means fewer actual cases. Still, there are many carriers who are asymptomatic, which is why experts have consistently called for testing to be increased, even among the healthy. In any case, the government is looking for more ways to return to normal. Malls and marketplaces have already opened, and now the 2-week isolation requirements for Israelis entering the country have been eased to allow for more home quarantines instead of forcing everyone into COVID hotels. Restrictions on shops and businesses are also lifting, and many parks and nature reserves are opening too. Then the health ministry is reopening fertility clinics to otherwise healthy women after treatments had been suspended in mid-March. The economy minister, Eli Cohen, wants eateries to be opened by May 21st instead of the currently scheduled May 31st, and the education ministry wants all students back in all classes by next week. Meanwhile, China is still attacking United States politicians for criticizing Beijing over its handling of the coronavirus pandemic, specifically over allegations that China withheld information about the virus until after it was too late. In fact, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has dedicated most of its press briefings over the past week towards rejecting accusations made by Western politicians, especially Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And here with us to discuss is founder and president of the Jerusalem Washington Center, Gideon Israel. Now, China published yesterday an article pertaining to 24 preposterous allegations by some leading United States politicians over its handling in the coronavirus outbreak. What were the main excuses?
Well, the Chinese Foreign Ministry published 24 allegations that the United States and potentially other Western countries have leveled against China. And these allegations included that, Wuhan, for example, is the origin of the virus. So they rejected it by saying that where the first case is reported isn't necessarily the origin of the virus. They talked about allegations such as that the virus was leaked from a lab, that China delayed responding to other countries in terms of disseminating information on the virus. China expelled journalists. China's interfering in the United States elections. All these allegations, they one by one, they used various media sources to reject them and kind of show or prove that the United States is lying about these allegations.
But a lot of these allegations, including the one that pops out the most, is the one about foreign journalists being expelled. A lot of these are verifiable. So how is this information campaign or misinformation campaign working abroad?
Well, China has been waging a campaign across the globe to persuade and in some cases to pressure other countries to say positive information about how China is dealing with the coronavirus. So we have examples of China approaching people in the German government and asking them to release positive statements. We have reports that they pressure the European Union to take out allegations of China disinformation in their report on the coronavirus. There's even a story about Chinese government officials approaching the president of the Senate in Wisconsin to approve a resolution that says China handled the coronavirus very well. In fact, he was so incensed that he introduced a resolution saying that they handled the coronavirus inappropriately.
Wow.
And there's also other allegations from Taiwan that China is pressuring the World Health Organization from allowing them to be part of the global summit on the pandemic. And of course, there's the most recent report that came from German intelligence, where German intelligence alleges that in a conversation between China's President Xi and the World Health Organization's leader, Dr. Tedros, Xi requested that he delay spreading information about human-to-human transmissions from the virus, and also calling the virus a pandemic.
All right. Well, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out into the future, especially in terms of implications with Israel. As you've said, it's had a lot of implications elsewhere around the world. Gideon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the economy is starting to get back on its feet, but the results of the coronavirus pandemic have left deep scars across the working class. ILTV's Nittany Manson reports.
In just a month's time, unemployment in Israel skyrocketed from an unprecedented under 4% to a dangerous over 26%. That's nearly 1.1 million people suddenly without work in Israel. And seemingly adding insult to injury, those most affected by the layoffs and salary cuts are the youngest and weakest in the economy, those whose average salary was already a third lower than the national average. According to new data compiled by the Finance Ministry, the lowest paid, youngest, and oldest workers in the market have been the first to lose work, 54% of whom work in small businesses. The news isn't all doom and gloom, though. Around half of those put out of work because of the coronavirus are expected to return to work over the next few weeks. And the Finance Ministry is forming directives for the government to take for the benefit of everyone else. For one, the government is advised to invest in those who've lost their jobs by helping them learn other skills. The report explains that this investment can even lead to better quality integration into the job market and raise in the long run the productivity of the economy. But whatever the case, investment in the unemployed is needed fast. The maximum unemployment many Israelis qualify for runs out in just 50 days, meaning that hundreds of thousands of workers aged 18 to 24 will be out of cash soon.
Speaking of unemployment, finding a job in itself can be a stressful, frustrating, and even depressing process. But what happens when there's a deadly virus outside and the job market becomes more competitive? And more importantly, how do you stay motivated and keep your head above water emotionally? To answer that, we are joined now by Israeli psychologist Dr. Camila Folkosh-Lavan. Thank you so much for being with us now. What are the psychological effects of unemployment and loss of income? Because there's got to be some, less obvious outcomes apart from financially induced stress.
Mm-hmm. So it affects people very, very deeply in many instances, especially if there is already a pre-existing financial difficulty. It could lead to sadness, to feel a sense of loss, sense of feeling trapped, depression. So it's very, difficulty sleeping, aggression. And so it's very, very important to realize that there are real problems that could happen and to kind of keep an eye on that.
All right, and you kind of touched on this, but losing your career, you mentioned in a way that it can also set off maybe like a loss of identity. And there was actually a lot of that reported after the 2008 crash. So how do we make sure that we don't sink into cycles of, self-pity?
So it's very important to understand that something like that already also starts from before. It's very important that you as an individual, develop yourself in different areas and are not as dependent only on your job. So, for example, the more roles you have, the better. Like, if you are a good friend, or if you have hobbies, or if you have different interests, or if you have more than one skill set that that could be marketable, if you don't yet have them, so it would be very good to reach out and to look around, especially during this time, to see what you can maybe study or learn. So what other ways of income would you be able to have so that you're more versatile? And if a loss of a certain job or an income from one job isn't then as stressful. It's also very important to remember that during these stressful times, the stress goes also on the family and on your loved ones. So often we will end up talking to those that are close to us in such ways that we would never even dream to talk to someone, a coworker or a friend or someone on the
Sure.
street, because there's this automatic assumption that they will be there for us and they will stand it. So a lot of times we end up screaming at them or being very not nice, and it's uncalled for. So it's something that also is very important to kind of look out for.
So quickly, what's one tip that you would want to leave people with, to combat feelings of anxiety, depression, etc.?
I think it's very important to be sensitive to yourself and also to others, and see if you're very frustrated, if you have difficulty sleeping, if you feel like starting to drink or smoke or hide somewhere in some substances. To be aware of this, and if necessary, do reach out to a professional, because in the more extreme cases of this, it could even lead to attempt of suicide or murder, on the other hand, of someone that you maybe weren't thinking of, but there's this huge emotional outburst. So be aware, be careful, and understand that this could lead to something serious. So if you see some signs that aren't seeming to you very good, or if you see it in your loved one, do talk about it and do address it.
All right, Dr. Forkash-Levan, thank you so much for joining us again. In related news, the Tourism and Travel Agency has been among the most impacted by coronavirus shutdowns, and Israeli flagship airline El Al is no exception. But the government has just approved of a major loan to keep El Al afloat. Israeli El Al Airlines is in a tough spot. At least 6,000 employees of El Al and its subsidiaries are on unpaid leave, and they'll likely stay on leave until June 30th. So in efforts to keep the lights on, El Al is asking for a $400 million government-sponsored loan guarantee, and the government is answering the call. As of Monday morning, the Israeli Finance Ministry has given the go-ahead to fulfill El Al's request. Now El Al just has to respond, which will also depend on the approval of the airline's union. But the deal does have some major strings. In order to receive the loan guarantees, the airline will have to agree to some massive cost-cutting measures. For one, the air carrier's owners will be required to put in 100 million shekels, or $28.5 million of their own money, back into the company. That or dilute some of their stake. Meanwhile, executives and the board of directors must make cuts to their salaries, and then the airline will also have to lay off nearly a third of its workforce, or about 2,000 employees. Free flights for employees and their families will also no longer be allowed. And finally, at least temporarily, no shareholders will receive any dividends. Now, it turns out that the economic crisis in Israel has skipped certain Israeli companies, even leading to an increase in their profits. I'm talking, of course, about companies in the medical cannabis industry. And with us on Skype with the details is Dr. Dadi Segal, the CEO and founder of Panacea Pharmaceuticals. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, I understand that in the last quarter, your company's revenues reached over 10 million shekels. That's an increase of 60%. What's the reason for the sudden gains?
Well, we've been seeing strong demand in the last couple of months with the increase of the market here in Israel, and also the turning of the new regulation system that kicks in more strongly in the last couple of months.
Wow. All right. And you focus on cannabis-based medical products. So who are your main consumers? Are they here in Israel or are they abroad as well?
Yeah, our patients are here in Israel. We supply them with premium medical cannabis products. The idea is that we're supplying products with the same qualities of a medication in terms of safety, efficacy, standardization, with all the benefits of medication, yet given the medical cannabis legislation here in Israel.
All right, and you have factories in Israel, New Mexico, and Malta. How has your production, your sales been affected by the pandemic?
So when the COVID situation started, we realized that we don't have any other option but to continue deliver to our patients same quality and the same quantities of products that they so much rely on. And therefore, we have decided that our production facilities have to still be able to output the same quantities. What we have done is to take certain measures, such as to work around the clock in separate shifts, which the workers did not interact among themselves in order to comply with the COVID regulations of quarantining here in Israel, but still maintain the same production capabilities. And this is how we coped with the situation. We saw increased demand in all those months, and therefore we had to continue to produce.
All right. Well, Dr. Segal, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck in the future with your company.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, there's another business in Tel Aviv that is now about to close, but the loss of revenue for the Telefon bike rental program has almost nothing to do with the coronavirus. You see them absolutely everywhere in the city. Rows and rows of green-painted bicycles available for rent by the Tel Aviv municipality. But by August this year, the city's Telefon rental system will be over, and its partnership with FSM, the company that owns and operates Telefon, will not be renewed. But the fact that COVID-19 has undoubtedly cut into bike rental profits, this is not the reason for the scrapping of the program. Rather, it's simply because of a gradual loss in demand. Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Huldai blames the development of the electric bike and scooter market, as well as private e-scooter rental companies, for the loss in interest in Telefon. And he adds that there's just no justification for investing public money in a service for which there's low demand. FSM, on the other hand, is still looking to take something away from all this. The company argues that it was in the process of updating its network to include electric bikes and to support pay through other means like the public transit debit card, Ravkav. And because the city is terminating the contract with FSM early, FSM will likely seek compensation for its losses in revenue. Still, excluding its first year of 7 million shekels in profit, Telefon only netted 4 million shekels in gains over 8 years. Meanwhile, the bicycle rental market overall has accounted for nearly 120 million shekels in Israel in about that same amount of time. In other news, tonight we begin celebrating the Jewish holiday of Lag Baomer, where it's customary to light bonfires and perform special annual ceremonies. But this year, and in part due to the coronavirus epidemic, traditions will be tweaked just a little. Joining us on Skype to give us the update is Rabbi Ariel Constantine, founder of the Tel Aviv International Synagogue. Now, first off, why do we celebrate Lag Baomer?
Thank you, Aaron, for asking. The Lag Baomer is a celebration that is 33 days into the Omer, counting from Passover up to Shavuot, from the time we left Egypt and had our physical freedom until Shavuot, where we received the Torah, the Ten Commandments. It is actually relatively new in terms of its practices. It only really started becoming a day in the 12th century and became really developed in the Kabbalistic period in northern Israel. And that became accompanied with various customs like lighting bonfires, bows and arrows, sports days, parades, etc., to mark the end of this mourning period where Rabbi Akiva's students ceased to die. There was a plague, the Talmud says, because they weren't honoring one another and acting respectfully. And therefore, this plague stopped, and we honor this day with a day of joy and happiness.
So I'm hearing, the story about the plague, and I identify obviously a lot of similar elements between that story and this epidemic. Is there maybe a lesson that we can learn here?
No question. First of all, there's the lesson of unity, of pulling together, of respecting one another. I think one of the most amazing things that has held Corona to a relative minimum is the fact that we've been respectful for one another. We've been caring. We've reached out to each other also in Zoom meetings on the internet and social media. We've been supporting those who couldn't go out and shop for themselves, the elderly and the high-risk people. I think this has been really a highlight of Israelis and Jews coming together, supporting one another. And that's really the lesson of this Sfirat Omer period, that we need to work on loving one another and giving to one another unconditionally. And this is certainly a fixing the ills of the past in many ways.
All right, so finally this year we'll not be able to light fires or go to Mount Meron to mark the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And those breaking these restrictions in Israel actually even face up to a 500 shekel fine. So what can we do to celebrate this year?
So first of all, the celebration of bonfires is a relatively new custom. It comes from the tradition that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a great Kabbalist in the 1st century CE. His passing was on this date of Lag Baomer, and we would originally light a yortzeit candle, a memorial candle, became a big bonfire as he was such a great light to the nation of Israel and giving us hope through the exile of continued spirituality. It also became a symbol of Bar Kokhba's rebellion as they were lighting fires from mountain to mountain to communicate and to also celebrate the victories. But the bonfire, I think, has already taken a little bit too far. The point of it is, again, to bring people together, sit around the campfire, sing songs, toast marshmallows or potatoes. And it became just a point in of itself to light the biggest fire possible, became a bit of a pollutant and dangerous. So I think toning it down a little bit is not a bad thing. And focusing on the point of togetherness, the point of Jewish resilience, the Jewish spirit through the exile and through the return to Israel, and the perseverance and never giving up the hope that we have an opportunity to build ourselves as people and as a nation, and bringing ourselves back to Israel.
All right. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much. Chag Sameach, happy holidays, and have a wonderful holiday. Thank you so much again for being with us.
Thank you so much. Happy Lag Baomer to all.
All right, now as Jews around the world get ready to mark the Lag Baomer holiday, the Antiquities Authority is giving Israelites another reason to celebrate, and ILTV's Nittany Manson has the details.
Nearly 2,000 years ago, around 132 CE, the Jews of ancient Israel rose up against the Romans in the Bar Kokhba revolt. And though the rebellion ultimately ended in failure, their dreams of liberating Jerusalem have lived on. And now the Israel Antiquities Authority has uncovered a rare coin from the time of the revolt, right in the city of David.
This find is a bronze coin. What makes this coin rare is the fact that out of 22,000 coins that were found within the old city of Jerusalem, only 4 are dated to the time of Bar Kokhba revolt. Another fact that makes this coin rare is that under this palm tree, which is seen here, we can see the name Jerusalem inscribed on the coin, so in ancient Hebrew. And it's the only coin out of these 4 coins which remarks the name Jerusalem on it. And on the other side, we can see grapevine, and around it is written the second ear to the freedom of Israel.
Again, though, while the rebels caused a major headache for the Roman occupying forces, Roman reinforcements had been set in to squash the revolt, and it's these same soldiers who are thought to have taken and spread these coins.
The soldiers of these units went back to their bases after the suppression of the revolt and brought back with them these coins. It is likely that this coin was brought by a Roman soldier from the 10th Legion as a souvenir from the revolt.
The coin was discovered by the Israel Antiquities Authority in the William Davidson Archaeological Park, just beneath the Temple Mount and north of the city of David Hill.
Finally, this next story is unbelievable, but a medical miracle has just been performed in Jerusalem. Surgeons have managed to save a man from a rod impaling his head. A month ago, Kamel Abdelrahman took a typical trip to see the status of an apartment that he's building for his family. But things took a terrible turn when he fell from the 2nd floor onto an iron rod that went straight through his head. Rahman says that he couldn't move, but he didn't feel pain, so he started shouting for help. Then in moments, his family found him and called emergency services. With some crazy luck, the rod had entered directly between 2 major arteries supplying blood to his brain, but they didn't appear to be damaged. So after hours of analyzing, doctors managed to very carefully remove the rod, and then in a second 10-hour surgery, they repaired the damages to his head. But when Rahman woke up, everything seemed to be working well. In fact, he's already been sent home. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. It's another gorgeous evening with clear skies and a comfortable low of about 60 Fahrenheit or 16 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow should be sunny and hot again with highs of around 89 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. So it's time to whip out the sunscreen unless you're into the look of face mask tan lines. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel.
Your faith was strong, but you needed proof.
This is, of course, the amazing Israeli actress Shira Haas. This is her audition tape for the Netflix series Unorthodox.
Overthrew ya. She tied you to her kitchen chair. She broke your throne and she cut your hair. And from your lips she drew the hallelujah.
Of course, obvious why it went viral. But that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.51 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.